Hi, welcome back. Episode 4 of Conserving the Sherborne Cartonnage. Gosh, it's been a while, hasn't it? Thank you for your patience. Also, thank you for all your lovely comments that you've left on the previous episodes. It really means a lot to hear that you're actually enjoying it and, that, you take the time to actually write as well. That's quite sweet. Episode 4, we have a lot to catch up on this episode. But before we carry on, I'm going to do something radical. Episode 4, I'm going to introduce some new characters. So I know that is quite out there, but I'm sure you can cope. The conservation of the cartonnage was in full swing when the COVID pandemic hit and we all had to go into lockdown. This obviously put quite a break on the work on the cartonnage. So when we were able to go back to work and in the museum, Verena asked 2 of her colleagues to join her. Barbara Wills is a senior conservator with decades of experience in conserving ancient Egyptian artifacts. I actually made a film with her in 2016 about the conservation of a crocodile mummy. You might want to have a look at that film afterwards because it's a good one. It's a great object. Film's okay, but anyway, go and have a look. Helene Delaney is also a conservator who specializes in painted surfaces, and I made a film with her actually in 2016. She was checking for pests on a new acquisition that was coming into the museum. Really interesting film, lovely piece of work by the South African artist Karel Nel, so have a look out for that afterwards. Not to kind of gas on for too much longer because we've got a lot to get through in this episode. So let's hear from Verena.
Over the past few months, we carried out a huge amount of work on both base and lid. As conservators, we are quite used to working on delicate objects, but this cartonnage really turned out to be one of the most fragile and challenging objects we've worked on in quite a long time. I worked quite intensely on the top half of the base with the aim to reconstruct the head end and also the right hand side. These areas have been severely damaged and were partially collapsed, with the textile layers completely disrupted. Before I could even think of reconnecting the various break edges, I had to first carry out a large number of repairs within each single layer. Quite often this felt more like keyhole surgery, as I had to start with repairing the lower layers first and then gradually work my way up to the top. And the extreme brittleness of these textile layers meant I had to work very, very carefully in order not to cause any damage while trying to insert these repairs. There are a huge number of repairs hidden between these layers. I've transferred the base onto this perspex sheet, which is raised so that I can monitor the exterior with the painted decoration while carrying out these repairs. Basically make sure everything is lining up neatly. Once the individual layers are stable enough for me to handle, I can then try and match the break edges and see how it all fits together and where certain fragments might go. And it's really a very fragile 3D puzzle. It's certainly a great moment when suddenly everything lines up and all makes sense and the original shape suddenly emerges. Now, we've really come quite a long way. The base is finally in one piece, which is a bit of a milestone. I must admit, for quite a long time I wasn't sure if it would be possible at all to join all 3 fragments. But after working my way up and down the object many times, carrying out a huge number of repairs, I obviously became more and more familiar with the object, but also how the object responds to my interventions. And in addition, I've become more confident in the stability of my repairs using Japanese tissue paper and Clucel G. I eventually decided to give it a go and try to join the sections. The parts are basically connected using heavy-duty paper tabs, which I was able to insert in between the original textile layers. And in addition to these tabs, I've been filling any gaps also with Japanese tissue paper, and I deliberately left the edges of the paper fibrous, pasting them over the edge of the original textile layers in order for the fibers to give that additional grip and strengthen the joint. I've used this technique also in a number of other areas, mainly here joining any breaks in the side walls and also reconstructing the foot area.
Just a little time-passing interlude from me. The conservators, all three, carried on working on the base and the lid at the same time. So Barbara was really focusing on the foot case and the face of the lid. Helene was stabilising the interior of the base, really doing all the repairs inside. Verena was backwards and forwards between the base and the lid, doing all the major structural repairs. In a way, I suppose you can say that the work that they did on the base was almost like a prelude or a warm-up for the work that they then had to do on the lid, because the lid is just so much more complicated. It's a much more three-dimensional object, and so therefore just much more complicated. And also I just wonder if we can just take a moment to do a little bit of lid appreciation, because this is what it looked like when it first came into the studio, and I just wanted to kind of like remind us of that, because it's a bit like me on a Friday afternoon actually. But yeah, no, so it had this major pleat right in the middle around the hip area, where because the cartonnage had been kept in an upright position, it started slumping under its own weight. So that was not very good, and I think I'll let Verena tell you how she dealt with this.
I basically needed a support that can be adjusted easily throughout this lengthy treatment step. And here you see the articulated wooden frame with the cardboard arches. The height of the arches and the width of the frame can be adjusted while the lid is slowly taking shape. After a few weeks of gentle stretching, there came a point when there was one final push required to really undo this pleat, and with the help of my colleagues, we introduced additional moisture in this specific area using an ultrasonic humidifier. At the same time, we carefully pulled the lid on its support frame to unfold the cartonnage. It was really exciting to see that the painted decoration was actually quite intact in spite of this major deformation. With all hands on deck, we were also able to finally lift the lid off the historic mount, and we moved it back into the tent for further reshaping. Here we see the cartonnage after some significant reshaping has taken place. The big pleat in the center is gone, and I was able to regain the shape of the head end, while Barbara was focusing on the foot case. We are basically edging closer to what might have been the original shape, but we've now reached a point where it will be really valuable to hear John's thoughts on what he thinks the original shape might have looked like, and also what we should do in specific areas, for example, the chest and shoulder part or the face. So, hello, John. Hi.
Hi.
It's been a while.
It's been certainly 9 months since I've seen the cartonnage.
Yeah.
And I must say, it looks amazing. It's totally transformed from what we saw when it first came into the museum.
Yep, yeah, I keep looking back at our pre-conservation photographs to remind myself where we've come from. And of course now we are getting to the stage where we're really trying to find that original shape, and it would be really valuable to have your opinion where you think we should go in terms of shape, because I realized when looking at the original photograph, it seems like it's quite a box shape, but of course we see the object in its sarcophagus, and there are some shadows, so I wondered, yeah, what your first impression is in terms of overall shape.
Well, I think the overall shape looks very faithful to what we see in the photographs, and the amount of curvature that you see in the surface here is what we know from other mummy cases. I think already, you know, you're getting quite close to what the original appearance would have been. It's great to see that the foot is now more or less its correct shape, whereas before it was bent over and flattened. And immediately you start to be able to read more of the decoration, which we just couldn't see at all before. And I think at this end as well, the shape is looking very good. It's got the three-dimensional quality for the head, the wig, the face, and the gradual tapering down towards the leg. I kind of might have expected that at this point, where the end of the wig comes, there could have been a a sharper kind of distinction as you come into the body, coming
Yeah.
down a little bit. But it's possible that that was never part of the original conception, because it's interesting that the way that the bottom of the wig is painted, it goes straight from the wig into the collar.
Yes. Yep.
Whereas on some others that you see, other examples, you can tell that the bottom ends of the wig had a more three-dimensional shape.
Yep.
But actually, the way it's painted, that probably never was the case here. You're probably already pretty close to how it originally was.
The other question I had was around the shape of the shoulder. Also, for example, on this side, it's fairly box-shaped. On the other side, you have a more gentle curve. So I was wondering, what do you think we should be aiming for?
Okay, if I come around here on that side, I think this is where we probably need to look at the photographs, the excavation photographs, to get a sense of how that was proportioned before. Yes, well, looking at this photograph where it's still lying in its sarcophagus, I agree with you that the front surface looks quite flat, and it looks as though where these border lines are, there's a sort of angle almost coming down the sides. So I suspect that probably there is some scope for bringing that further down. I think particularly here, I mean, obviously this part is more distorted, but maybe using the width of the foot case as a guide to start. Clearly this part should go in more. And perhaps a little bit further up here as well. But I don't think we want to go too far.
Nice to see John again, isn't it? Imagine not seeing it for 9 months and then coming back and seeing that much changed. It's just incredible. It must be so nice. Yeah, so that was really cool. Not sure when the next episode is going to come out, but if you subscribe to our YouTube channel, I'm sure you will be notified of the next installment. And also going to introduce a new segment, because new characters mean they have to have subplots and all of that. So new segment called Repairs with Barbara, and we will be looking at that next week. Oh, I keep saying next week. I don't know if it's coming out next week. It might not. I don't think it will. There's no way that it's going to come out next week. Soon. It's going to come out soon.